Welcome to Fluorescene.
Hello and welcome to the Fluorescene Show, Season 1, Episode 13. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Glazier. Don't forget to hit that red subscribe button below so you get notified on future shows and segments. This week in ODs on Facebook, we've got eyelashes. A member posted this meme and says, "I'll tell women when in the slit lamp that they've got good lash game." Well, we've all seen this trend inside and outside of clinic. It's, well, not so subtle. Seriously, you could mistake some of these fake eyelashes for Alaskan king crab legs. At home, God forbid someone leaves one lying around. I can't tell you how many times I went to get a bug swatter and was about to smack that thing before I realized it was an eyelash. In clinic, they can present a few challenges like direct ophthalmoscopy, INR, and several others. Saw one lady whose lashes were so asymmetrical, I thought she came in for a stroke. Other than being good for batting away COVID virus and cheek umbrellas, they present a conundrum behind the slit lamp, not to mention what they can do to vision. Our community loves a great one or two discussion, don't we? We love it so much that we continue to discuss it on ODs on Facebook even after we leave work. Well, a doc this week posts about a 1 or 2 game he played with a patient when he said, "Which is better, 1 or 2?" And the patient says TCV ECL. Doc says, "You don't have to read it, just tell me which is better, 1 or 2." And the patient reads it again. Well, you know what happens now. The doc either put his head down on his desk, did the eternal facepalm, or one of several reactions that range from disgust to disbelief and in between. What we don't do, but what we want to do, is slam that phoropter into their face repeatedly. Other people, 1 or 2 answers. "Doc, which is better, 1 or 2? Patient, no." "Doc, no is not an option." Or they might say, "Which is better, 4 or 5?" To which we all know the response is likely, "Number 2 was better than any of them. Can I see that one again?" Or, "The eye can tell what they are, I just can't read them." Or, "Well, 1 was brighter but blurrier, and 2 made the letters look like they had curvy edges." Or the doc says, "Better 1," and the patient jumps in 1. To which you bite your lip and answer, "Sweet as pudding pie, wait till I show you 2. Or the patient who whips out the 2015 line, throws in an unnecessary information, but it's blurry, and doesn't buy your explanation. It's okay if it's blurry because it's so small, yet they insist on having you do the test again. Ain't got time for that. A member asks for the best optometry-themed rock band. We got some great ones like Blind Leopard, the Cyclopenolates, the Macular Degenerates, the Scleral Spurs, Rolling Cones, Accommodative Rock, Band Keratopathy, the Ciliary Body Band, good one, Billy Eyelash, Fleetwood Macula, and the Dendrites, who are likely to go viral, by the way. Good stuff. Well, that's all on this week for ODs on Facebook. We got a great show for you today. It's the ODs on Facebook SECO edition. SECO is around the corner, April 28th to May 2nd. It's one of my favorite shows. We have 2 SECO optometry legends tonight on the show. Dr. Paul Ajamian, a founder of Omni Atlanta, founding member of the Optometric Glaucoma Society and National Hall of Fame inductee, and Dr. Walt Mayo, the father of optometric online communications and a prolific innovator and influencer in our field. Dr. Stephanie Wu is here with her first episode of Wu University and more. If you're planning on going to SECO, please be sure to hit me up in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel by hitting that red subscribe button to get updates on shows and segments and more. If you have an idea for your own segment for the show, please let us know by emailing it to Marcy, M-A-R-C-I, at odsonfb.com. Now, sit back, pour something, as long as it's not fluorescene, and enjoy today's Fluorescene show. Dr. Paul Ajamian is a graduate of the University of Vermont and the New England College of Optometry, and so am I. He completed a 2-year fellowship at the renowned Bascom Palmer Eye Institute in Miami, Florida. He was instrumental in conceptualizing and founding the nation's first true co-management practice in 1982, which became Omni Eye Services of Atlanta, where he served as center director since 1984. Since then, he has mentored many doctors that have started centers modeled after Omni. He's a founding member of the Optometric Glaucoma Society, author of 2 textbooks, and editor of popular monthly columns in Review of Optometry. He's an internationally known lecturer and serves as an adjunct faculty member for 14 schools and colleges of optometry. In 2000, he served as president of the Georgia Optometric Association after having served as legislative chairman and PAC chairman for many years. Under his leadership, Georgia expanded their scope with glaucoma and oral narcotics in 1993. He served as general chairman of the Education Committee for SECO International since 2002. He's also a founding board member and past chairman of the American Board of Optometry. Dr. Ajamian was chosen as the Optometrist of the South by his peers, and in 2000 was voted one of the 10 optometrists of the decade by Optometric Management magazine and its readers. In 2014, Dr. Ajamian received the Distinguished Service Award, the highest honor for lifetime achievement bestowed by the American Optometric Association, and in 2015 was inducted into the National Optometry Hall of Fame. Welcome, Dr. Ajamian.
Thank you, Dr. Glazier, very, very much. Thanks so much for having me.
We are fortunate to have you here, and thank you for coming to share your knowledge. And I'm glad our viewers are going to get to learn a little bit about you. And we're going to start, outside of optometry. Something that I always thought about you. I thought you were a hardcore Southerner, but then I learned maybe not. Tell everybody what a catamount is.
University of Vermont, catamount. And even more importantly, how did University of Vermont get the acronym UVM? And I think it's from the Greek or the Latin. I took 2 years of Latin, don't remember much. Universitatis Viridis Montes, University of the Green Mountains.
That's right. I think I've heard that.
So the logo, our mascot was a catamount, had a beautiful 4 years there up on the hill overlooking Lake Champlain across to New York. It was really a special undergraduate time.
We toured there with my son not too long ago, and the facilities were incredible. Just incredible.
It really is an amazing campus. You know, believe it or not, Alan, I chose UVM sight unseen. Could have gone to UMass for $1,000 a year. I'm really dating myself with that tuition. But instead chose the $6,000 expensive out-of-state UVM because I heard it was beautiful and first set eyes on it my first day of orientation. So I was very fortunate to be there.
Where did you grow up in the New England area?
Born outside of Boston and raised there, little suburb called Needham, and then spent 4 years after UVM at the one optometry school I applied to, our alma mater, you and I. Back then, I think my first year it was called the Mass College of Optometry.
Right.
When you went, it was called the Klein School of Optics, wasn't it, back in the 40s or 50s?
Yeah. It was New Anco then, and now it's still evolving, right? Necco. I can't get used to it.
Exactly.
But some of my textbooks did say Klein School of Optics. So even back in '93 when I graduated, I was still learning stuff from the 40s.
Exactly.
Borsch.
But remember that I applied to that one school because I was going to live at home, and I commuted in and out from Needham on our famous transit system, the T, which wasn't really reliable, but studied for boards and did a lot of studying on the T in and out when it wasn't either catching fire or breaking down. And, managed to hang out with my friends in town when I needed to or wanted to. So
I did the same thing, and I sometimes studied in the $5 seats in Fenway Park. That was
exactly.
I don't know that they have those anymore. My dad's family, part of it is from Revere, so we were tied to that
Revere.
Yeah, Revere.
Gotta like it. So you're a Patriots fan?
No. We're Washingtonian, fifth generation Washingtonian. It was just part of my dad's family. I had an aunt up there who welcomed me when I came up there. One of a little bit of the homework I did for this interview, somebody I talked to wanted me to ask you what the name Bill Wallace means to you, and tell our viewers about how the name relates to your fellowship at the prestigious Bascom Palmer Eye Institute.
So Bill, to this day, is a dear friend. We were texting back and forth yesterday or the day before, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the first two students chosen from NECO, And I think you remember, I'm not sure he was still there, but David Greenberg, Dr. David Greenberg, an OD who was an associate dean, had these incredible medical connections, Alan, throughout the Boston community and then beyond. And he used those to leverage the externship program, which then was perhaps one rotation in your fourth year. But he had the vision to see that you do at least 2, possibly 3 rotations at a community health center, and then perhaps at a VA or Walter Reed Army Hospital or beyond. So one of his connections led him to Miami, to the University of Miami's ophthalmology department, which is Bascom Palmer. And somehow this man established a relationship, a 1-year contract to send 2 students 6 months apiece. And they based it on grades. And because I lived at home and studied diligently on the T in and out, I was one of the ones chosen. And when the 6 months was up, I mean, it was an incredible experience. It was an incredibly scary experience at first, because back then, you recall, there were very few optometrists that knew anything about disease, that lectured about disease. And here I am, a 4th-year student in the midst of working with 1st, 2nd, and 3rd-year ophthalmology residents and fellows, and some of the most amazing names in ophthalmology at the time, from Joel Glazier to Don Gass to J. Lawton Smith. And the chairman of the department was a man named Dr. Edward Norton. And I ended up working with him a little bit, and he kind of liked me because I worked up his patients and I stayed with him. A lot of the residents were scared and they'd bolt off to surgery. Long story short, at the end of the 6 months, I said, we need to stay. I need to stay a little bit longer. How do I stay in this place and gain more knowledge and take advantage of it? But I proposed this residency program, which I didn't even really know what that was. There weren't a lot of residency programs back then. And Dr. Norton sort of bought into it. And we came up with a $12,000 stipend for 4 positions. And one of those 3 that I selected, or that I helped select in addition to myself, was a gentleman named Bill Wallace. He was an IU grad. He had done an incredible rotation with Jack Terry at the Huntington VA. And he was really anxious to do another year of disease. And so Bill and I became fast friends, and we played tennis and enjoyed Miami, but mostly spent a lot of time at the hospital training. And at the end of that year, Bill was anxious to leave Miami. I actually wanted to stay, so they appointed me the director of the residency program. I stayed another 6 or 8 months, and Bill came up and started what was then called the VEF Educational and Diagnostic Center, which was the precursor to Omni, the referral center.
Taking one step back, does the residency still exist?
It does. So Dr. Norton got a lot of pressure a year or 2 after we started the referral center in Atlanta, because we ended up on the cover of the AOA News at the time. A lot of ophthalmologists basically gave him a lot of flack for training optometrists. So it was shut down for a year or 2, but it's going strong now under the leadership of Dr. Mark Dunbar, who's been there for a long time. I know you know Mark. And
Mark. Great guy.
The student program is strong, and there's been so many amazing names trained out of Bascom Palmer that have become lecturers, educators, clinicians that have led the profession forward. So I'm very proud looking back at that.
It's arguably the best eye hospital, in the world. Now, back to the Visual Education Foundation, which ultimately became Omni. What did it take to make that a reality?
Well, it took the idea of a really amazing, persistent, and sweet man, optometrist Bill Cuthbertson, little country doctor from Cornelia, Georgia, to push the idea and say, we've had enough of sending our patient to the community ophthalmologist and getting badmouthed. And all of a sudden, our patient, their family, their friends aren't coming to us anymore. And he said, why don't we start a clinic? And that's the way he said it. Let's start a clinic and let it be controlled by optometry, who work hand in hand with ophthalmologists that don't want to steal patients. They just want to do surgery and what they were trained to do in advanced disease. And so he's the one that kind of bridged the gap with SCO because he was on the board. And he garnered some of that foundation money that would have been lost if they merged with the UT system, to buying a piece of land and what really Willer Allen on this day. And VEF was born. They brought down a few interim clinic directors who unfortunately didn't have the training that we did, and it almost failed before it really started. And that's where Bill's business savvy and his clinical acumen really came to play. He was the perfect person at the perfect time to come up and put it back on track. And then we agreed if it was successful, or at least looked like it was going to be successful, that I'd come up and work with him. And that's what happened.
You know, about that time, so my father was an OD in Maryland, and he was very active in the Maryland Optometric Association, driving the effort to use diagnostics, which we didn't have. They couldn't dilate a patient, couldn't put a drop of fluorescene in their eye. He led that effort. He said it turned his hair gray, and he always talked about how difficult that was. I can't even imagine taking optometry to that co-management level, the challenges involved, breaking through to those ophthalmologists, and that must have been the biggest challenge of all.
The toughest thing, Alan, you're absolutely right, related to just finding a surgeon. And I give tremendous credit to a man named Bob Lennon, who was an ophthalmologist at Clayton Eye Center on the south side of town. He agreed to come up 2 half days a week and cover us. And then after him, Ralph Diorio, one of my true heroes, who came on full time as our first medical director and surgeon. And I mean, Ralph was threatened. He got hang-up calls in the middle of the night. He was blocked from just about every hospital when we went to get privileges to do cataract surgery. But he truly believed in his heart that we should be able to do whatever we're trained to do. And he stuck with it. And it was a rough few years. It really was. Emory University was one of our adversaries, along with most ophthalmologists. They just didn't want us in town. And the fact that we worked with optometry was kind of like a scarlet letter. And so they put roadblocks in our way for managed care plans, for insurance credentialing, and for hospital privileges. And it was tough.
Yeah,
but we personally won the day.
I've heard some of those stories. You're the core group of ODs that helped grow and expand Omni now are part of the Keystone Group. Now, another close mutual friend of ours, who maybe you'll be able to figure it out, told me that I should ask, I hear you were the leader of Keystone. Whatever that meant in that voice.
Right. Well, we knew we had a good thing going. Everybody came through Atlanta and trained, and then opened their respective centers, starting with Chattanooga, Baltimore, New Jersey, out to Omaha, Denver, Miami. And we really were a band of brothers that wanted to stay together. So we Stone Group because we skied there, the meeting ever since. As a matter of the first year that we won't ski together because of concerns.
I hear Keystone is a beautiful resort. I haven't been there myself, but that was Ed Wazlowski who asked me to say that, and he sends his regards. He was one of my I did one of my rotations at the Omni Baltimore after NECO, and he was not only was he an amazing educator and great guy, but we built quite a friendship out of it. We got a couple of funny stories that I'll tell you sometime over a beer. I don't know if they're appropriate for this show though.
Ed's a great guy, and every one of the center directors they're just all amazing people.
A part of
Mm-hmm.
the interview I really was looking forward to getting to was talking about SECO. SECO's been a meeting that I've attended regularly for almost 20 years, and it actually was the first large optometry meeting that I attended. In many ways, you know, SECO is Paul Ajamian, and acknowledging how much you work, how much work you put into it doesn't do it justice. Can you tell us a little about your history and your role with the conference? Mm.
Absolutely. We're thrilled that you've been part of such an important part of SECO over the last 10 years with ODs on Facebook, and the party that everybody looks forward to is the big OD on Facebook gather. Yeah, it's meant so much to me. Back at that double wide trailer, Alan, 1/3 of the building was occupied by the Southern Council of Optometry, and that's when I was introduced to the organization, the Southern Journal of Optometry that Bill Wallace and I wrote for pretty regularly. And that's when I became a volunteer, when it was down at the Radisson Hotel in these smoke-filled rooms and ashtrays at every place setting. It was such a family type of meeting, but I knew it was special because it was a meeting that pushed the envelope. And we were doing workshops on foreign bodies, like you say, before we could even do diagnostics and dilate eyes. So that became really one of the sidelights and highlights of my career. I stayed on the committee for a number of years, and then in 2002 was appointed chairman, and I've been chairman since. And it's a team effort. There are incredible officers every year that come up with ideas. We've always had an amazing committee that works together. I have used it as kind of a creative outlet to deliver education in some different ways, but the credit goes to the whole team, not to me. And I've just been very blessed to be part of it.
Well, you know, what would you, that's great. And when things get back to normal, I think we're going to actually have some kind of an in-person SECO. I think I saw the dates of April, end of April, maybe. What would you want people who haven't attended SECO before to know about the conference?
So we are planning a meeting. I just spoke to our amazing executive director, Elizabeth Taylor, this morning, and it's on. It's the last week of April into that first weekend in May. And, you know, for the people that have never been, we had a bunch of newcomers at the New Orleans venue when we switched from Atlanta for the first time in a long time last year. People were just remarking at the advanced level of the classes, the consistent quality of the speakers, the special sessions, the videos, the exhibit hall, and really just the care that the committee takes and looks after attendees, rather than just, okay, you signed up for the meeting, you know, you're on your own. It's a Southern hospitality kind of meeting, and we take care of all of our people, our newcomers. And like you said, you've been going for 20 years. We'll have people say, this is my 43rd SECO. And that means a ton to us. It's a big responsibility to make sure that each and every year when they come back, that it's the same great experience. So
I think you
we do
nailed that.
special venue things. We were at the Porsche track doing a malpractice course, and afterwards we got out with professional drivers and did the figure 8 course. We meet at restaurants. We give ghost tours. We do all kinds of fun things that kind of mix it up rather than just sitting in the classroom.
Yeah, that's so important to keep things fresh. I think you're really spot on about that collegiality thing, because being my first major meeting, I made lifetime optometry friends down there, and I was, you know, nobody knew me back then. I was young and just had my private practice, and that was it. So it really also helped foster my passion for learning and connecting, which I ended up finding that was my biggest passion, connecting people. So it was a good fit, and I'm glad that we're working together and look forward to more of that in the future. Moving on, want to talk about your legendary contributions to the profession on the legislative front. There's so many things that I want to ask, but only so much time. So I just want to say in '93, you led a fight that made Georgia a leader in therapeutic privileges. Can you tell us a little bit about that fight that you led and what you were feeling when you won?
You know, it was a darkly lit, dimly lit room in Macon, Georgia, where a bunch of GOA members met, and we heard a presentation from a young man at the time, Mark Kapperman from Tennessee, who was their legislative chairman. We had also met with a man named James Vaught, who went on after me to become chair of the ABO, and you know James.
Yep.
And they kind of had the blueprint for how you pass a bill within a year or two and not take 10 or 20 years. And so I stood at the back of the room and I said to our president, Stuart Thomas, you know, somebody needs to take charge of this and get this thing going and do what they're doing, what they did. And he looked at me and said, great idea, how about you? And at the time our daughter was just born, and so I went home and told my wife that I had this opportunity. She was incredibly supportive, and started going to fundraisers and meeting legislators. And at the time, it was a very democratically controlled House and Senate, and probably knew most of the 170 House members and definitely knew all 54 Senate members. And that took about a year, working with the most amazing executive director that I've ever had a chance to work with, which is, her name is Georgianne Bearden. She's retired now. And we had this incredible committee, divided the state into regions and zones and captains. And back then cell phones weren't that common. So we had fax trees and telephone trees. And we found an ally in the Senate Majority Leader, and he helped us with a number of committees and roadblocks that had been there previously, and we got it done. And it was an incredible feeling to do it that quickly. At the last minute, Alan, this is one of the stories that I still wake up at 3 a.m. and go, whoa, did I do the right thing? We had to decide whether to keep oral narcotics or oral antibiotics. We had to get rid of one of the two as a compromise. And that was rough. And to this day, when I ask people, which would you have given up? They all say narcotics. Well, I gave up oral antibiotics because I figured if we had narcotics, the controlled substances, we'd be okay getting the antibiotics a year or two later. Well, everybody listening knows how tough it is to pass any bill that has an optometry backing. And so it wasn't until, that was 1993, that the governor signed that bill. It wasn't until 2007 we got oral antibiotics back in the bill.
Wow.
Which was rough. So I stayed on as chair for a while and almost got it in 2000, stepped down as chairman, became president. And you know, it's always something. We lost in 2000 on the oral antibiotic issue over the changing of the state flag. The governor was in support of our bill, but he also wanted to do something to the flag that legislators didn't want. So they got back at him by voting against our legislation. It was really something.
You know, it's so random sometimes, that process. I understand that decision for the narcotics. So if you're forced to choose, first of all, you're going to make a lot of people unhappy who disagree with you. But I think choosing the more difficult one to get through probably was really wise, even though it did take a long time to get the other orals.
Exactly. And it's why I continue to push that in every state we practice to our full scope, that everybody has a DEA number, that everybody writes prescriptions for oral antibiotics, that everybody treats glaucoma. And as you know, that's just not happening. And we've worked so hard on all of these bills, going back to diagnostics. I mean, for that matter, pushing that everybody dilates people when they need to be dilated, rather than convince them that, you know, getting this picture for $45 is better and easier. I mean, we're teaching our patients that dilation is bad, when back in the day, we just were so envious of states that had diagnostics, and we'd go to clinic at NECO, and an ophthalmologist named Dr. Eisenberg had a key around his neck that unlocked the cabinet with the dilating drops in it. And
Because you know how bad everybody wants to steal dilating drops and use them at home. I mean, God's sake.
exactly. He wanted to make sure we didn't use those dangerous drugs.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great segue into the last professional question I had, and that is, it's not even a question. I just want you and me to get on our soapbox for a minute and remind viewers why working to continue to advance the profession is critical, and the critical role that your state's and national association plays in this, and how important it is for everyone to be involved.
Well, and that all starts, such a great point, Alan, with membership in your state and national association. The only groups that will advocate for you as an optometrist and make sure you have a place to go to work, a profession to work at. The number of young grads that are getting out and kind of transient, well, I'll practice in Atlanta for a couple of years and I won't join the GOA or the AOA because, you know, that's $60 a year or $30 a month or whatever it is. I'll just fly under the radar and maybe I'll join someday. I mean, that's where it starts. That's all people are asking of new grads initially. And then to get involved and even give, you know, $10 or $20 a month to the political action committee that we all, you know, spend on Starbucks and satellite TV and pay-per-view. And I mean, just put a little bit away for your profession. It's practice insurance. I've always called it that. It's still that. And so that involvement starts small, just by writing a check. And then you can graduate up to being involved in your local society and getting on the state, the association board, being a trustee, and being a leader. You know, it's as a leader, it's been so much more interesting to see things when you're on the inside. And then to continue to do things that demonstrate to patients that we're committed to lifelong learning. And you were one of the first to embrace and become a diplomate of the American Board of Optometry. I mean, board certification is a very recognized term. You see it, I saw it on 3 billboards coming home this morning. And yet optometry seems to want to be board certified, but they don't want to seem to do the work and go through the formal process to actually earn the title. And so I encourage people to continue to push themselves and be able to prove to patients that you're on a lifelong learning venture that will benefit them directly by being involved with the American Board of Optometry as a diplomate.
Excellent. And a great way to start getting involved is on the most basic level. When there's an effort, write letters to your legislatures. If you have a patient who is involved in state or even local government, educate them during the exam on what your capabilities in your education and the scope of your education is. It's the people who fight against us are telling them different things. They're telling legislators. Right. I just saw an article in about Florida, how they're telling legislators that optometrists aren't even medical professionals. So that's what we're up against. And it doesn't always involve giving money, but giving time and making an effort, being cognizant of who's around you, who you're talking to, and how you speak about the profession is also a tremendous help.
Well, we're so afraid in general until you really get in the arena of legislators. I mean, they're people, they're professionals. Some are lawyers, some are telephone repairmen and women. And bottom line, you made a great point, Alan. Get them into your office for a complimentary eye exam so that they see that we don't just make the glasses. And that's one of the stereotypes that when they speak from the well against one of our scope bills always comes up, and that's a legislator that doesn't know an OD and doesn't know what we do. So bring them into your office, get to know them, and not just getting to know them for optometry related issues, but for community issues. I mean, they represent us. They also need us to help them with their campaigns, whether it's writing a check or making a call. They expect that, and it's our system. It works, and we need to be part of it.
Excellent. So we're going to wrap up soon, and just a couple things. I want people to get to know you. And what are your interests outside of optometry?
Well, I'm trying to foster some additional interests, because most of my hobbies during my almost 40-year career now relate to optometry, speaking meetings, which has been an incredible blessing. We've seen a lot of the world at great meetings and met some incredible people. Advocacy we've talked about, and that was a side hobby for a number of years. I don't do it as much anymore. And then teaching, locally, our externs and our residents is still a passion of mine. And I'm known as kind of a tough professor, but it's because I have these high standards and want every one of us to be able to match wits with and clinical skills with ophthalmology. So when I kind of looked at my wife and said, am I 3, 5, 8 years from retirement, whatever it is, I want to keep working for a while. What am I going to do? So I looked back at childhood, and I was a ham radio operator. So I just got my general class license for ham radio. And I've always loved music. So I'm taking back up piano and playing a little bit of guitar, and trying to exercise more. And, I love skiing, but like I say, this is the first year the Keystone Group hasn't skied together, and that's kind of breaking my heart, but we'll get back to that. So a few things here and there other than optometry.
Cool. And tell us about your family.
Wife Susan, the love of my life, was a patient back in 1986. One of my students, Friday at 5, said, you need to see this patient. I said, I'm on my way out to visit my cousin who lived in town. He says, nope, you need to see this patient. And so I went in and fell instantly in love, but of course couldn't ask her out. So 6 months later, she came back into town and asked me out. And we were married 6 months later, and it's been 33 years. And we have one daughter, and her name is Natalie. She's an occupational therapist in Charleston, which is a beautiful town that we love visiting. So someday we may end up there. I'm not sure, but thank you so much for asking.
That's a great love story. I love that. Was it totally random that she came back, or had you kept in touch?
We wrote each other a letter, almost like Romeo and Juliet, and she went out of the country. She didn't get my letter. She wrote me a letter that I didn't get for a while. When we finally got the letters, we said, okay, now I've got a letter, but I still can't ask her out because she's a patient. And so that one Christmas, she was back in town working her nursing job. She's an RN. And she asked an elderly cousin of hers, should I call and ask this guy out? And Mom Libby said, what have you got to lose? So she asked me out. I was a chicken when it came to asking girls out. So thank goodness she did, or I'd probably still be single.
Well, that is a fantastic story. And I love the fact that our viewers are going to get to know more about you personally, because yes, you're known as a tough educator, and somebody though who also earns respect through that education. Everything that everybody learned about you today was just amazing, and thank you for everything you bring to the profession and that you've brought to me personally and professionally. And if you don't mind me asking, hopefully I can have you back sometime.
That'd be wonderful. We've got a lot to talk about, the future of the profession and additional scope legislation and the state of the schools and expansion schools, and there's just all kinds of hot topics going. So I'd love to come back, but very honored that you're having me on, and thank you to the listeners and viewers who are watching. But it's a great idea. You've been an innovator and a high-tech creator in optometry, and we're very grateful to you.
Well, that means a lot coming from you, Paul. Have a great weekend. Stay safe down there. In the next few months, I'm sure actually in April, I'll make sure I see you when I come down to Seco.
We will see you soon. Thank you, Alan.
Hello, and welcome to this week's Fluorescene Eyecare Industry News, presenting the latest in ocular research, optometric politics, business, and more. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Glazier. Please be sure to subscribe by hitting that red subscribe button below for updates on weekly shows, segments, and newly released features. In Presbyopia news, Visus Therapeutics announced the commencement of its Phase 2 clinical trial of Brimochol, topical ophthalmic solution under investigation for the treatment of presbyopia. Brimochol is a proprietary pupil-modulating eye drop that combines two well-studied FDA-approved pharmaceuticals, carbachol, a cholinergic agent, and brimonidine tartrate, an alpha-2 agonist. Together, they produce a pinhole effect, which reduces the size of the pupil so that only centrally focused light rays are able to enter the eye, thereby sharpening distant and near images while minimizing side effects. The Phase 2 clinical trial is a double-masked randomized crossover study designed to evaluate the safety and efficacy of two proprietary formulations of Brimochol, topical ophthalmic solution, in patients with emmetropic phakic and pseudophakic presbyopia. Top-line data from its Phase 2 trial is expected in mid-2021. In glaucoma news, researchers sought to examine the long-term change of central corneal thickness in terms of rate in eyes with primary angle closure, as well as to analyze events that could affect central corneal thickness. 26 patients with primary angle closure who had a follow-up period of more than 5 years were analyzed. In total, 52 eyes were enrolled. Over a long period of observation, the authors discovered a significant reduction in central corneal thickness in primary angle closure eyes. They also observed that different treatment modalities or acute angle closure attacks had no effect on rates of central corneal thickness reduction. Long-term central corneal thickness changes, in addition to baseline central corneal thickness, would be beneficial to the clinical evaluation of primary angle closure patients. In contact lens and allergy news, Johnson & Johnson Vision announced approval from the Japanese Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare for the first and only vision correction contact lens that relieves allergic eye itch. The lens contains ketotifen, an H1 histamine receptor antagonist for the prevention of itch associated with eye allergies. The product is the first in an entirely new contact lens category, and approval for a contact lens with drug delivery capabilities. In my opinion, this is the beginning of an entire new class of specialty contact lenses, and will enhance the practice of optometry and the perception of optometrists in the eyes of the public. I'm very excited to watch this vertical develop. In AMD news, Lineage Cell Therapeutics, a clinical stage biotechnology company developing novel cell transplants for serious medical conditions, announced new positive interim results from its ongoing 24-patient Phase 1 and 2A clinical study of its lead product candidate, Oprogen. Oprogen is an investigational cell therapy consisting of allogenic retinal pigment epithelium cells administered to the subretinal space for the treatment of dry age-related macular degeneration with geographic atrophy. We're starting to see results from several late-stage clinical trials of new cellular, RNA, monoclonal antibody, and other biological technologies, and this field is set to explode in the next 2 to 3 years. Speaking of which, in rare disease news, ProQR Therapeutics released positive results from its Phase 1 and 2 Stellar investigating QR421 in patients with Usher syndrome and retinitis pigmentosa. The therapy was well tolerated at all doses, and patients did not have any serious adverse events or side effects or inflammation according to the release. After one injection, a mean increase of 6 ETDRS letters was observed at week 48 in all treated eyes compared with untreated contralateral eyes. Among the 6 patients with advanced disease, an increase of 9.3 letters was observed at 48 weeks and maintained for more than 12 months compared with no eyes in the sham group manifesting a benefit. The increase was maintained for more than 6 months according to the release. ProQR plans to initiate 2 pivotal Phase 2 and Phase 3 trials by the end of the year. In corneal news, a study attempted to assess the corneal endothelial cell morphology and count in keratoconus patients and their correlation with different stages of keratoconus. Authors concluded that qualitative and quantitative structural changes were observed in endothelial cells of eyes with keratoconus in stages 1 and 2. keratoconus does not significantly affect the corneal endothelium in those stages. The endothelium in stage 3 shows significant changes in polymegathism and pleomorphism. They recommend the penetrating keratoplasty may be superior to DALK in management of stage 3 keratoconus, as the endothelial cell changes will interfere with the stability of DALK. The recommendation needs further studies with longer durations and follow-up. And that's all for this week's Fluorescene News. Be sure to hit that subscribe button below to receive updates, and be sure to tune in next week for more of the Fluorescene Show.
order that lens from? Contact the manufacturer, because it's likely that the manufacturer will actually have a scleral lens fitting set within that company. And this is really cool because 10 years ago, there weren't that many labs that had scleral lens diagnostic kits, and now almost all of them do. So if you're already working with a lab, I'd highly recommend reaching out to them and finding out if they have a scleral lens fitting set and if you could borrow it or get a loaner set. And another tip I would have is attend workshops. So if scleral lenses are something, maybe you've read all of this, the different articles online, and you've watched a lot of webinars, but you really want that hands-on experience. A lot of these in-person meetings have these wet labs. So Global Specialty Lens Symposium, that's in January every year. There's Academy, that rotates around the US. There's almost always a scleral lens workshop where you can get hands-on experience. AOA, so optometry's meeting in June, they usually always have a scleral lens wet lab. And then just even some of the local meetings. Another thing you might want to do is ask the representatives from the laboratory if they have a wet lab that you can attend, or do they have a representative that who would come out to your office and teach you how to fit scleral lenses in your own office. So those are some little pearls I have as far as learning how to fit scleral lenses. There's lots and lots of information. If you go on any of the major optometry publications, there's lots of articles on scleral lens fitting. But some of the webinars, workshops, some of these hands-on things can really help you dive in. When you get a little bit more advanced, there's lots of really great practice management things. So for instance, I started a Business of Scleral Lens Facebook page, and that's been really helpful to practitioners who have questions more about the business side of scleral lenses, not necessarily just the fitting side and the troubleshooting and the clinical components, but more of the business and practice management side. So there's lots of these free resources that you can use to help you get started fitting scleral lenses. And if you have any other questions, if you have a question that you would love to see answered on this segment, please reach out to me anytime. It's Dr. Wu at wuu.org. You can also visit the website, which is wuu.org. And you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Dr. Stephanie Wu. And it's a pleasure to be here with you guys, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye.
There is no argument that our next guest, Dr. Walt Mayo, is the father of optometric online communication. He's a 1985 graduate of the Illinois College of Optometry, where he was awarded the Lawrence P. Feigenbaum Award for top clinician in his class. Joining Coastal Eye Group that same year, Dr. Mayo served as the president of the South Carolina Optometric Association and was awarded its Outstanding Service Award twice. In 1999, he was named one of the top 10 optometrists of the decade by Optometric Management Magazine. He's served on the editorial board of every major optometric journal out there. He's authored nearly 200 articles as well. Dr. Mayo was named the 2001 Optometrist of the South. He has also been named a South Carolina Optometrist of the Year, and in 2015, he was given the prestigious President's Award by the Southern Council of Optometrists, who specifically cited his more than 20 years of work with the Council, the leading educational organization in the profession, and SECO, as we all know it, we're familiar with. He speaks nationally and internationally, and as you'll learn during our interview, is and has been a prolific innovator for our profession. He is in the top 3 optometrists who influenced me, and very early on when I formed ODs on Facebook, I looked to Walt as a model for optometric online communication, and I still do. So warm welcome, Walt. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Glad my tech worked. You know, people mistake me as a tech guy, but you're the tech guy. I connect people and I market, and I'm good at marketing. But we're with a real technician. You know, I want to start by introducing the viewers to Optcom List and what you brought to the profession through this first communication tool that we used when I was a very young OD. It was the original online resource for optometric questions and concerns, and it predated social media, but it was very social. And you created it, I think, in 1994. Is that right?
Yeah, it actually came about after some other things that were happening. I actually joined in a little bit late behind some people like Dave Davidson, Mark Ryboy, Bert Happel, in the BBS network. It was called OpNet, and that was pretty old technology. And then I experimented with trying to find ODs on AOL, and we created an AOL conference with about 200 ODs. And then that kind of spun off into the listserv, which is known as Opcom List, which still runs today.
That's great, because that kind of outlines now historically exactly what happened and how it came about. You do all this while you do a ton of other stuff. You have your own website development company, drsites.com. You have created the largest library of eye care images, the International Optometric Eye Atlas. You run the Optometry and Technology Facebook group, which I believe has now over 17,000 members, and SECO. So
Right.
there are probably many first initiatives that you brought to optometry online and offline via education that I'm missing. So please, whatever I miss, fill them in on it as we go along. But I want to start by having you take us back to a simpler time, a time when people still ask the question, what's the internet? And tell us the story of OpcomList from concept through launch.
Well, sure. Some people may remember things like CompuServe and other things like that. But the OpcomList basically was a mailman-based email list, which Mailman is still a popular listserv piece of software. There are others out there. And eventually, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I switched it over to a Google group. And the people who are on the list, they've just been with me for 20 some years. It's, we kind of all have aged together. We all know each other really well. It's a very personal environment. Growth has slowed tremendously because of things like ODs on Facebook and other forums. But it's still there and it's still plugging along, and we all consider ourselves pretty close friends. And a lot of them show up at meetings. It's really strange because a lot of my best friends, I look back and I'm like, where did I actually meet that person? And it was through, OpcomList or later on through the more like Facebook and things like that. But definitely most of my social circle came from that. And it came back from a time when, it was quite a lot different. We've got the Twitter situation where you have very short pieces of text. Back then when it was OpNet and then later OpcomList, you're talking about people who would write 2,000 and 3,000 words, at the time. It was a very lengthy discourse. And, we don't really see that as much today. And I kind of miss that. But again, it's still going on to some extent on OpcomList. A lot of people who kind of aged with me, they've already retired. So it's amazing how many of them who've retired have stuck with the list. They're still there. So it's been something that's gone on, and I'm glad to see it's still around. But certainly my efforts are focused mainly on SECO, and that's where all my major time is put in as far as technology goes. It's a 24 hour a day, 12-month a year endeavor, and like I've told many people since 1994 when I joined SECO, I've always said I have the best job in optometry.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about today, that people who don't sit on our end of the computer really, I'd like them to know, is that, there's a difference between a group and a community. And both of us, both you and me, we've really built communities. As anyone can be part of a group, but to be part of a community, you really need to value the space that you communicate within and demonstrate its value by your conduct within the community. So we're similar that way, because I know as far back as 97, I think you wrote about it, the need for an online code of conduct. There were many suggested rules, and we can't focus on all of them, but two of them that resonated with me specifically were, one of them, you said behave privately and publicly, which meant to me that you should act the same way online that you would face-to-face with someone, because a lot of people act in ways that they never would in person with other people, and that disturbs the peace. Can you comment on that?
Well, absolutely. I think that people feel pretty safe, behind a screen. Like, well, I can say whatever I want and get away with it. But, the fact of the matter is, you can't build a community when people behave like that. And it makes moderating it very, very difficult because, we're talking about a group of extremely intelligent people. And if you get someone who decides they're just going to they're going to stay right on that line, right on that edge of the fence where it's like, how much can I get away with? I'm not sure what their motivation is, but they'll kind of push the envelope and say, how much can I push Walt or Alan to, before they get on me? And then if you finally make a decision to get on top of them and say, hey, you got to change your behavior, then, they blow up and say, hey, you're picking on me and you're treating me poorly. But what people don't tend to understand, and I think you'll understand this better than anybody else, is that while that person's walking the fence and they're creating all this grief for you, in the background, you've got members who are just barraging you, saying, why are you putting up with this guy? Why don't you do something about it? And then they get upset with you. And that's all happening behind the scenes. that makes it very, very difficult to deal with. And I'm sure you, more than anyone else in the history of this profession, has had to deal with that. And that's the least fun part of the job.
Oh, I've got stories, believe me. Yeah, it's funny. Like what if you want to get intellectual about it, what I realized was that if you allow people to communicate in a way that most people don't want to communicate, they will run your group, and they often create, what I saw happening in that other group was that they created a core group of people who liked to engage that way, and they everyone else was afraid to say something because they would get beat up, and they marginalized them. They push them to the side. So the engagement of the group goes down. These groups, your group, whether it's 20 or 200 or 20,000 doctors, these are experts, and they all have different experiences, and they have valuable expert-driven content to add. But if you run the group in a way that, or you don't run it and you marginalize most of them, the sharing goes way down and the value goes down, and then you don't have that great a place.
Well, the second that you create an image of yourself as the moderator, that you're intolerant of people's, ability to express themselves, then you're done for. And so, that just adds another layer of complexities, that you've always got to be viewed as someone who's fair and yet not a pushover. And, it's just like parents who try to be a parent and their kid's best friend at the same time. It's a very difficult line to walk. And I probably tend to be a little bit more of a pushover than I should be at times, but, I will bow up if I have to. And, the thing about it is, if you finally do get to a point where you say, hey, you got to go, then unfortunately those same people tend to pop up other places and give other moderators grief. And that's not fun. We all deal with the same group of people.
Right. Or they go somewhere else and they start behaving there because they don't want to get kicked out. They give you the hard time, then they behave somewhere else. I've seen it all, man. But this isn't about me. I really want to talk about you. You and me, we have more than a few stories to tell for sure, like the time when this happened or that happened. Can you tell us about a time when you were leading your community out of a difficult situation?
Well, I'll go back to a story that just kind of shows how important all this can be if people will take the time to develop real relationships through these groups. Most of us who do that online now, we've kind of resorted to email or text messaging on a one-on-one basis. But it used to be, especially back in the early days of OpCom List or even farther back in the OpNet days, that people developed a real bond as a group. I will never forget that we had one Thanksgiving, this was a long time ago, where one of our most prominent members stopped communicating. We weren't really sure what was going on. And about a week into it, we finally started making some phone calls and found out that he had passed away at the Thanksgiving dinner table. And I remember myself actually, really couldn't hardly talk. I mean, I came to tears, and I don't do that very easily. And when I let the people know that he had passed away, it kind of rolled through our community like a wave. And that's because we had, through these long discussions, 500 words, 1,000 words, going back and forth, we were very close friends, not like today where it's a lot of times more superficial. And that was an entire group. It wasn't a one-on-one relationship. I mean, it was a lot of people who were involved, and that kind of situation showed me, just how powerful this can be if it's treated with respect and it's done properly. And I think that's part of the problem right now, is that, those kind of things are easy to manage when it's, 20 people, 100 people, a couple hundred people. When things start getting bigger, it's kind of hard to have that same environment, that same level of trust. And I think that's the hard part right now. And I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but there's different networking styles, and one type of networking is kind of a star-shaped network where you've got a central server and then things kind of come off in a star shape around that. I actually view ODs on Facebook like that, is that you're kind of the core group, and then it's allowed people to get to know each other and develop special interest, and then you've splintered off all these other small niche groups like optometry and technology, different types of specialty groups. And I think that's really cool, because I don't think that could exist if we didn't have that central core of ODs on Facebook, where people can kind of get the word out, kind of get together and say, hey, we need a group on Ortho K, or we need a group on, well, heck, I just started one a month ago called Optometry, Food, Wine, and Travel, and the thing has exploded. And I give you credit for that, because that's where people kind of learned about it. But literally in 1 month, we have added over 1,000 members. So, again, it's no one's an island. We're all kind of in this together, and, your group being so big, it's kind of where people can kind of, it's the genesis of a lot of these other smaller groups where people can get more involved in more detail on certain things.
So my insight's a little different around that. I don't disagree, but I think it's the same, but it happens differently. For instance, in our group, you'll see people say something that influences you, and then you'll notice periodically their name when they post again. You kind of get familiar with them. And then what do you do next? Well, you may friend them on Facebook, and then you're part of their regular Facebook, where you get to know each other outside of ODs on Facebook more intimately. And plus, early on too, I wanted the people to get to know each other as well. So we started having our Vision Expo parties, where the theme was, press flesh with the people that you're friends with online in together. So I think that intimacy is there to a degree. Of course, it's not as closed and close in a smaller environment. It's in a big environment, but then it spreads into, like the star, like you said. I love that analogy. It spreads out to the points where they become actual friends on social media. I know it's happened to me 1,000 times. So in that sense, it's the same.
Well, I think that's where things get solidified. And although I think the virtual meetings are great, the in-person meetings are really where these relationships get nailed down, and really, where you get these firm, lifelong friendships. I mean, back when Opcom List was kind of the big dog, we used to have what were called the Opcom bashes at SECO, and they were much smaller than the OD on Facebook parties, but they were significant, and we had a lot of fun with those. And I mean, you've had parties at every major meeting, including SECO. Sometimes you get a group of people, and maybe 20, 30 people who annually they show up at the same meeting, and it's you're kind of creating their own special destination. We certainly have that with my group of friends at SECO. We plan which restaurants we're going to go to and things like that. And I would encourage people to do that. We're never going to be as close and productive as a profession if we're only virtual or social media. We need to have that face-to-face connection, and so we need to preserve that. And SECO was the last big meeting that went off live, and we're probably going to be the first one that happens again in late April, early May. And I think that for the sake of the profession, the exhibitors, everyone involved, that I hope people come rushing back now that they're vaccinated to the meetings that we have on a local, regional, national, and international basis. So I hope that happens. I really do. I've kind of dedicated my life towards creating one of those destinations with SECO, and SECO's been around for 100 years. I don't want to see it go away, and I don't think it will. But certainly we're facing challenges every meeting that we've never had to face before, and hopefully we'll get it all behind us and kind of go back to some level of normalcy.
I know technology is big in your life, and it sounds like SECO really is taking up most of the time. And Walt, of course, is in practice at Coastal Optometry for more than 30 years now. Did I get the name right?
It's actually Coastal Eye Group. It's a big ophthalmology group that was founded in 1974 in the Georgetown, Myrtle Beach area. And we now have 5 offices, 14 ophthalmologists. We have a subspecialty office. And, I've always, I was the second doctor in the practice, joined them in 1985. And now I'm the longest running actor in the play. There's no one who's been with the practice longer than I have. But again, I only practice 1 day a week. My role is greatly diminished. And, when I wake up in the morning, I'm instantly thinking about SECO and technology, not really patients so much. And I enjoy seeing them, but when I can give that last day, I'll probably celebrate a little bit.
That's great. Yeah, I felt similarly lately as well. Yeah. So I know you have a son. Tell us about the rest of your family.
Um, 3 kids. I have a beautiful wife who's been with me since she was 18 years old. I can't believe she still puts up with me.
Wow.
Yeah, I have 3 kids who have really interesting backgrounds. One was a professional ballet dancer, a young man, and he now has a beautiful family. He married one of the dancers that he trained with, and they have 2 little boys.
Wow.
And then my daughter, who's the youngest, she's actually an OD now, and
Congrats.
she's married to one of her classmates from SCO. So it's 2 optometrists in the same family, which is really interesting because everyone thinks she became an optometrist because of me, but I think it was more in spite of me. Then my oldest son, as you mentioned, he works with me in the computer area, and a lot of times there's things where when he's not doing web stuff, he's helping me with Seco things that are like, please help me, I can't do all this today, and so he'll help with that kind of stuff. And that's been a big help as well. He also helps moderate some of the Facebook groups, and people don't really recognize that, but he's the one's kind of vetting memberships and things like that. I know you've got some hired hands that do that, but he spends a lot of time doing that as well. So yeah, it's 3 great kids, and my daughter has 2 young daughters of her own, so I've got 4 grandkids now, and life is just very good.
You're on that grandkid track. That's great. I don't I've handed off some of the work moderating and looking for guideline violations, but I still vet every single member that enters the group. It's just too important a job not to be able to hand it off to someone who just doesn't really understand the industry or what people might type when they apply to be in there. I always fear that people will get in the community that are journalists or something that might write an article on what they see in there and paint us as the greedy middleman. So I'm very, very anal and careful about who I let in. And anybody sees the number of people in there, 43,000. If you can imagine that 43,000 times I've vetted every single person, but I enjoy it. I actually enjoy it because it helps me learn who's coming in and who's in there. And, you can run a group much better when you know who's in there. And that kind of
and I think anyone who's contemplating running a group needs to think that they need to be thinking in those terms immediately, because if you let a group grow rapidly and not with a lot of control, then it gets out of hand, and you either have to shut it down, kick a lot of people out, or become totally moderated. And my optometry technology group is very big. It's not yours, as big as yours, but it's probably the 3rd or 4th biggest one out there, and it's fully moderated. I mean, I just have to have complete control over it. Lots of people want to post stuff that's trying to sell things and such. So that one is a little bit more difficult to manage. This new one that I've got, the optometry, food, wine, and travel, it's just freewheeling, and so far I haven't had any troublemakers, but it's really just extremely busy, and it's just been a lot of fun. And we talk about optometry, none at all. So it's a bit of a diversion.
Well, that's great. I want to start wrapping it up now, but I want to tell everybody to be sure to join Optometry, Food, Wine, and what was it? Food, Wine, and Travel?
Food, wine, and travel.
Mm-hmm. And I'll definitely be checking that out too. I think I already belong to it. And then also, please, what is Seco's website?
Sure. Well, we have 3 websites. We have secointernational.com, which is just kind of a website where you can learn about the history and the structure of the association. We have Seco University, which is our education portal, which again has audio archives, has COPE-approved CE, lots of it. And it's also where we handle all the registration and VOA for our webinars, which we've got webinars coming up. Again, we had 40 some events before the end of the year. We took a short break. We're revving up again big time next week. I think it's next Saturday, not this Saturday, but next Saturday. We've got a webinar that's not COPE approved, but it's CE broker approved for Florida, South Carolina, and other states that don't require COPE approval. We have a relationship now with the NAO, the National Academy of Opticianry. We were doing webinars for those, which everyone's welcome to send their staff to those. So, I mean, if you have people working in optical or contacts, send them, and most of these events are free. And then we have attendseco.com, which is dedicated solely towards our Congress. And right now you can go there and sign up to be alerted when registration opens, and the website itself is open and full. Right now it's just a splash page, but we are doing the final testing, and that should be going live in the next few days. I mean, very shortly, and registration's been pretty much vetted. So registration and the site's going to go live very, very soon. We're excited about that.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited about seeing you in person again in April. I will be there, and I encourage everyone to come join me. We'll figure out some way to do something socially. I don't know if we're going to have one of those big ODs on Facebook parties, but maybe a more intimate type of get to see each other again thing. And again, I want to thank you for everything of value you've brought to the profession, for everything of value you've brought into my life, and for being a friend and being there when I've needed you in the past. So you're awesome, and thanks for sharing your knowledge and your experience today, Walt. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alan. It's been a lot of fun, and any other time you need to fill some airspace, you just let me know.
This is more than filling airspace, but I would love to have you back. So again, thanks a lot, and we'll talk soon.